In this episode, we discuss whether there is competition and hierarchies in heaven or not. We discuss whether churches should know how much their members give. Then we discuss if we should be more diligent on who we choose to buy things from. Also, just an update, we are now on YouTube, TikTok, and Twitter/X. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and if there's anything you think we should discuss, hit us up on there. As always, enjoy. You're listening to Campfire Theology, where we explore topics you usually wouldn't discuss in church. So gather around with us because we believe the conversation itself is holy.
So many pastors and so many, and I believe it and I understand, and I think their heart is in the right place. I don't think they're doing it in a greedy way. But so many people talked about it and they're like, the Bible says it, and it's like the only thing in the Bible where it says test the Lord in this, and it's like, and it talks about those paying it forward, paying in advance of how when you tithe, when you do these things, you're sending it on up ahead.
Yeah.
Of where they're like, it's like the more I help people, the more I give, the more I do whatever, I'm going to reap rewards in heaven. But for me, it feels
like you're buying a position in heaven.
It feels like, oh, well, I'm going to have a bigger house in heaven because I did this and I did this. And it's like, oh, like you get to heaven. It's like, oh, well, you did good. You did, this guy gets a house up on the hill. You know what I mean? Like, it makes me feel like storing up your treasures and everything of like, man, Lord, I'm going to be set. I'm going to do like, I don't. Yeah. It feels really slimy to me.
I know what you're saying. I think I think that misses the point altogether.
Yeah.
I think it's not talking about physical treasures, when it's talking about storing up treasures in heaven.
Realistically, everything's perfect, right?
Right.
So if everything's perfect, you're completely happy. There's no sorrow, no sadness, no anything. So let's just say,
how am I better than the next guy?
Right, exactly. That's exactly it. But that's what I mean, though. It's like,
it's a good point.
And I'm not saying this in a wrong way, because I think
sure
his heart is the right thing. But Rick Warren, for instance, they've because his heart, every year they've donated. Every single year every year they donate a little bit more money for 40 years. They are now to the point where him and his wife for 20 years, and he said, and I'm not saying this to brag, he goes, for 20 years we did this, we didn't tell a soul, so that proves I'm not trying to get publicity out of this. But for the last 20 years, him and his wife have donated 91% of their income every single year and live on 9. Every single year they increase the amount for 40 years.
Yeah, it's easy.
And he's like, I'm storing up my treasures.
I knew that was
coming. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. No, but even so, people always said that too. Like,
it makes it a little easier. Yeah.
But even said
the person in Africa says the same thing about
life. He said he's been asked that by many people and pastors and everything of and even famous people when he goes around the world, and they're like, why do you think God let you write? Because it is it's the number one selling hardcover book of all time nonfiction besides the Bible. The Bible's number one. Purpose Driven Life is number 2. And he's like, he goes, the amount of money that book produced, I could have bought my own island without it. Right. And he's saying how much. When you get the number 2 selling book in the world,
right.
The
royalties on that are
he said the only reason he's like, I wasn't an author, he's like, why did God let me write that book? And he goes, no problem. I had a 40-year track record of tithing, doing all whatever God gave me. He knew that I could do it when I was broke to the point now. So when I got all this money, he knew I was going to give it all away. I didn't keep any of it. I gave it all away. And God knew that's the reason he believes God gave him purpose-driven life.
That's cool.
He's like, I had a proven track record of being faithful with God's money. And to the point now, he's like, I drive a 12-year-old Ford pickup truck. I did it. He goes, yeah, we could buy a whatever. He's like, we don't need that. We don't we're going to give the money to the church and to God. We're going to store it up in heaven. Our treasures are not treasures here that are going to rust and be stolen.
Yeah,
sure. And it's interesting, but I was thinking that I'm like, man, that guy's been so faithful his whole life. But if we're all perfect and we're all in heaven, we're completely happy. Theoretically, he should receive way more in heaven because this guy's literal, right? This guy's basically he's probably worth or would be worth a couple $100 million, and this guy's giving it all away.
Yeah,
and lives very meager. But yet, if we go to heaven, we're both completely content, and I give nothing. But yet, I'm still in heaven. How are you better off than me? Because we're both in complete, perfect art. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I struggle with that of unless you're storing up treasures for yourself to get more rewards, which is what the Bible tells you to do. And just, I don't know. It's a topic I can't quite understand. I want somebody to explain to me because it really, I think their hearts are in the right place and they're doing it for the right reasons. You know, it just
So I think part of the like sort of adversarial relationship between the two ways that you could sort out things. So either you can spend your money here on earth,
Yeah.
or bless other people and spend your money in heaven. I think what he's trying to say is that that's a dichotomy, and that it can only be one or the other. And so the better way is to not spend it here. The better way is to build up treasure in heaven.
correct.
No matter what you do, you're building up. No matter how you spend your money, you are rewarding yourself. So whether you spend it here on this earth where things corrupt,
Yep.
or spend it later. So there's no way to get around the rewarding yourself.
But I guess my question would be, what would be the reward? If it's not financial,
The assumption, right? We're assuming
So I
that
get-
it's something like a treasure.
Correct,
tangible, right?
it's a
But it
big
won't
house,
be.
it's a big-
So I feel like the reward is that you'll be in God's presence.
but we all will be.
Yeah, and I don't really feel this is another whole episode,
Do you
right?
get
But I
more
don't
time with
I don't feel like there's a ranking system in heaven. I
Right.
feel like your reward is
Well, I
His
think
presence.
Jesus will be above us.
Yes.
Yeah, the triune God. Yeah, I would
So
imagine.
there is some ranking.
Yes,
But if
it'll
there
be a pretty
was,
flat hierarchy.
You got to think that, like the
But I would think that there isn't a
or
ranking
Moses,
system.
King David, or you would think that those people most influential in the Bible would be highest in command, right? Theoretically, if there was a ranking system.
Maybe, yeah. I just feel like our reward is presence of God, like being in the presence of the Lord, and that is enough, and that is perfection in itself, and that we don't
Correct.
need, like, we don't even realize it right now, but we don't need the house on the hill, or we don't need like
Correct, 100%.
money in the bank or a treasure chest. Like, it'll be comical when we are in the presence of the Lord that we ever thought about those things, even
100%
on
agree.
earth.
Right.
And so I think, for me, this is how I always viewed it. Like, I don't think that we'll be like ranked when we get to heaven. I don't think there will be
I
a
don't either.
hierarchy.
I don't either. I don't know what they mean by treasures. I guess I can't.
I know.
Because again, a perfect example of our time. Billy Graham, in my mind, dedicated his complete life to God and did more for God's kingdom than I could ever grasp. Right? I'll never even be a fraction of what that man has ever done
I think
for the kingdom.
Yeah.
Like, I would think though, like, and don't get me wrong, I want him to. It's like Mother Teresa, anybody. It's like those people gave
Yeah,
so
you
much
guys
more
beat them.
sacrificially than I did.
Yeah.
I want them to get
Right.
more rewards.
Exactly.
Like, I believe they
No,
deserve
I
it.
mean, yeah, as a real, for real.
But what is that? What did they get better than? You know what I mean? If they stored up their treasures, what did they get greater
Or
than?
is it, I think foundationally what you're hinting at is something I've struggled with, of like everything here on earth, I always view nearly everything as a competition. And
Yeah.
Who's got the
Eh,
most money? Who's got the most children?
whatever, everything else, right? Like, so where I've struggled that correlates with this, son, is okay, I've tried to live the most God honoring life that I could for a long period. And what about the person who
dies
for 79 years lives the most sinful life
Yeah.
and then gives their life at the end? And it's like, are we equal in heaven?
Yeah.
You hate to even say it because it sounds
But-
so selfish.
Okay, but there's the prodigal son, right? It's like your reward is that you've been with me
Not
this
even a
whole
prodigal
time.
son, just the people who they pick up from the town that do the farming every day.
Yeah.
The person at the end gets paid the same as the first. It's
But
like,
they
Right.
did 1 hour's worth of work.
it's like you
Right.
the
Yeah,
wage.
yeah.
You have like,
But also the prodigal son, right? You have the prodigal son returns and they fatten the calf and they right, and the other son who is faithful is like, Dad,
Yeah.
what the heck? I've been faithful this whole
I've always
time, and
felt
he's
that way
like,
too.
hey,
Grant.
your reward is that you've been in my presence this whole time.
Yeah. He's and the
And so I think that, like,
yeah.
I never thought of it.
think about it. It's like when people have like a awesome, like sometimes we're jealous of people who have like this awesome come to Jesus story, this testimony.
Yeah.
It's like, I was a murderer and I was this horrible person, a drug addict. And I found the Lord when I was 40. And it's like, oh man, I'm jealous of that. It's like, yeah, but he had to go through 40 years of
Correct.
misery and hell on earth
Right.
just so he could have this cool testimony. So let's not be jealous of that. You had like 40 cushy years, man, and you like,
Yeah.
you know, I think sometimes we lose perspective of
So
that a
hey,
little bit.
do you think Satan has weaponized weaponize hierarchy and
100%.
competition
Yeah.
to the point to distort what heaven looks like, where we are all equal.
Correct.
So everything we do here
Yeah.
is I have to be better. I have to do this. I have to accomplish this. I have to accomplish that. And then we assume, because our entire lives, the better you do something, you'll be rewarded with something at the
Right.
end. Right? Like our daughters just got first place in soccer. They get a trophy.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh,
I think of the saying,
Not everybody gets a trophy.
but everybody gets trophy.
Right.
But in heaven, is it like everybody's equal?
yes.
So how can you
Everybody
take
gets trophy.
I think of the,
differences of people or differences of reward and take pride away from that? So how can you have like a sinless system that exists like that? Like some people would say like, oh boy, there are going to be games and competition in heaven because I really get a lot of enjoyment out of games. Well, do I get a lot of enjoyment because I'm beating the other person?
Yes.
And I'm right.
Right.
Yeah, I know you would well for sure.
Yeah.
But like, or do I just like the thrill of trying my best? You know what I mean?
there's
Yeah.
both, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think of the saying like comparison is the thief of joy. And it's not in the Bible, but it's like it's just a saying, and I think there's so much truth to that. Like
You said something though, and we keep saying yes, but now that I'm thinking about it, is everyone truly equal though in heaven?
I don't know.
That's kind of the question.
That's a good question. I think that there's
We
some
keep
verses
saying
on
yes,
that, but
we assume, but I have heard too multiple times of basically the whole earth is a test, right? So everything we're on here is to prepare us for heaven.
Yeah.
And when we get to heaven, if you've gone through all these trials and you've done all these things and you've been, let's say, more faithfully done all this, that you'll get more responsibility, more reward type of thing in heaven. So if you got more responsibility too, maybe you have a higher, because who's to say we don't have a ranking, right? Where we have kind of like elders, if you will, and different things where it's like,
Yeah,
okay,
I'm familiar with that. Yeah.
you know, like there's you went to seminary, help me out here.
I did. Yeah. I was on El.
Yeah, one day.
You know,
30 years from now.
It's like a Spanish one. El do.
because if you have
Or is there
responsibility, you have to. What's to say there's not hierarchies? Not in a bad way,
Yeah,
like,
I-
but that
I'm
you wouldn't be
saying,
jealous. Like you get there and you're like, oh, great, like King David, Moses, like,
yeah. Is it possible to eliminate
like who's to say I'm
human-
going to be jealous?
the human jealousy,
Correct.
the human pride out of that?
Yep.
Or it's
Still
like,
have hierarchy
man,
and
Michael
responsibility.
Jordan's amazing. I wish I had his skills.
Yeah,
But you just look at it and go, wow, and just enjoy it. for
correct.
what it
Just
is.
enjoy it. No jealous. Exactly.
Right. Isn't that kind of how we look at God though? Like we're not. I guess maybe some people are like looking at God saying, "Boy, I wish I could be Him," and like I have His powers and blah blah blah. I would remake the world that I'd be so much better. I'm sure people have thought that before, but like I think for me, like when I get to a place with worshiping God, it just makes me so happy that He's there, and it makes me so happy that I'm protected by Him.
Yep.
And I'm just happy to be with Him and
Yeah.
to just enjoy it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I wonder if there's something like that, like what you just said, David. Like you just, like should I just because I did X, Y, and Z, does that mean that I go up and now I'm bossing, Elijah? I'm bossing.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think it doesn't seem right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Agreed. I don't know. It just, and maybe we can't grasp it because we're thinking about it through our own lens, right? Of
That's probably the
with
right
this
answer.
world with sin and everything. Like I think a lot of that is we just, like they say, you can't fathom what heaven is and how great it is. Like
Exactly.
we keep looking at everything through the hierarchies of the earth, which there's nothing. It's funny as we talk about this, we all have this preconceived notion that hierarchies are bad
Right.
because of the
Right.
sinful parts of them, right?
Yes,
Of
the envy and the jealousy.
correct, the envy, jealousy, the pride, the mistreating people, whatever it is. But you take that out, there's nothing wrong with the hierarchy and all this stuff.
No.
And it talks about
Jesus.
Jesus and the angels, and then the people and the
Yeah.
like we're placed above the angels, right? And that's where the angels got with the jealousy of Satan and like
Well,
there's a lot of different things.
Yeah, it's
where-
funny because when
They
you break
talk
it down, our
about it in the
entire
Bible.
society is
Yeah.
broken into a hierarchy and people trying to get higher in nearly everything. Like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
president of the United States. Okay, so here's another question. Do you think the church should know how much the donors give? Who gives
No.
what?
No.
I don't want them to know.
I don't
the
think
head
they
pastor
should.
and everything.
I think it says.
I honestly hang out with, like, for instance, at my church, I hang out with the head pastor. I have coffee with him, whatever.
Oh, humble brag.
Whoa.
Well, I coached Mark.
That's how you get on the elder
son.
board too.
And our pastor's son, I got
Yeah.
to coach him in football. So,
Let's just, I got to
I'm on the elder board
I could
with
call
our
him right
pastor.
now. I got to
Yeah.
sell them.
all right, I don't have that, but I could Facebook him.
You're right, exactly. I liked one of his plays.
No. My point is, so I literally go out, I'll have coffee, we'll hang out, we'll talk. Super good guy. I don't want him to know a penny of what I spend because I don't want it to change any perception, whether it's good or bad. I don't
Yeah,
want
I
it to,
agree.
I don't want it to be anybody to be like, well, I need to keep up with certain members because I want to keep a contribution up, or I
But
I
some
think
churches
that-
operate that way.
right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't.
Like accountants, like it says, but with accountants.
Yes.
Is it kind of similar to your job, don't you think? Like you have to entertain.
Yes.
Correct, right? That's what I don't want it to ever be of like, oh well, I want to keep connected because this person's giving a lot of money, or just
Yeah, it feels really icky.
that.
Right.
Yeah.
I think.
Do they?
I think.
do
I
most
think
have
that's
pastors?
where we're called.
There's a large amount of churches I know.
Really?
The head pastor.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I don't
It
think that
might
that's
be.
right.
It
Yeah,
might
but
be.
why? Shouldn't there be a bookkeeper for the church that just
There
does
is a
like a?
But it's all dependent on
CFO or
each
something?
church. So, for example, our church does not know what each congregant gets.
Pastor Dan would.
But right,
that-
but
yeah.
we've hired a company to talk about those sorts of things, and their motto is that people should know, your staff should know what each person gives, because that way, if somebody stops giving, then you can approach them and be like, "Hey, is something going on in your life?"
Yeah, I hate
No.
that.
I agree.
I hate that.
That's
I mean, I think
completely-
that for me, it's like that. It goes back to, I think it's Matthew. He talks about like the left hand shouldn't know what the right hand is giving,
Correct.
and I feel that absolutely you shouldn't know what your
100% agreed. I think
What
there
your
should be
neighbor
one
is giving,
financial
right?
person that does the bookkeeping simply for bookkeeping reasons, and nobody else should know to have zero influence, good or bad. I think it should be
And
completely
that person doesn't make decisions
correct.
about things.
It should be somebody who doesn't even know you from Adam. It should be just
Exactly.
I don't know. I see names on a spreadsheet. I look at.
There's Adam, there's David. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know him.
I don't know
Both-
him or him.
Right, exactly.
they're both not tithing correctly. Yeah, that's interesting. I would like to know if that's the case because I don't like that.
No, I don't like that either. I mean,
nope,
I mean,
don't like that. It's a perfect Michael Scott quote.
Yeah, he can do stuff. Those printer sales. It is sort of like the investment idea. Like this person's our biggest investor.
Right.
So if we want to buy a new lawnmower, if we want to buy a new projector, I think it was in the board meeting I went to. It was a previous church that I had been at. It was about like buying a new projector, and they couldn't buy it unless the person who contributes the most money to the church was on board for it. So the entire meeting was to try and be convinced this big investor of the church
Oh, I hate that.
to buy this projector because this is what we need to increase our effectiveness in ministry or whatever. And I just felt like that was so.
That's fake.
Yeah, I mean,
It's like a college booster on us.
exactly.
You know, like,
Yeah.
yeah, we need this investor. We'll name this wing of our church after you.
Yeah.
If you give this dollar.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't
like
think
a,
church
like a hospital.
I don't like that at all.
Or that
That's what it
thing.
is.
Romans 13:1. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established.
Which is why I should forget that.
Yeah, and then further down it says, this is also why you pay taxes, for the authorities are God's servants who give their full time to governing. Give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor.
Right.
A little bit relevant, not super relevant.
Good, we could talk.
Get just what is Caesar's. That's Jesus.
That's Jesus.
I feel like that's
Yeah.
So my other question is, should we be more conscious of who we buy things from? Like what types of companies and the things that they support,
Basically, what
where
you said,
where you're spending your
Alcohol.
money at.
relative. You did talk about that.
Yeah.
he was talking about a lot of retirement investments.
Correct.
Yeah, right within the yeah, exactly. So
I think it
obviously-
gets to be, I would say yes and no
Uh-huh.
for me. Yes, in the sense that it can get convoluted very quickly because so many companies interact with. I mean, if you go down the chain,
Yeah.
right? Like maybe this company is good, but the vendors that they buy from are like, where does it end, right? Like you could go to the point where it's like almost the problem now is so many of these big corporations that are involved with
They're all in bed with one
everything,
another.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That,
You know,
or with terrorists.
so how do you one, I think it's almost impossible to find all that out. And even if you did, you could spend your entire life searching. I think the ones that are blatantly obvious, I would say for me at least, you know, I'm not going to do anything that, even if I could make a fortune on it, I'd never buy like foreign hubs. I'd never buy something with, for instance, there's nothing really wrong with them, but like Hooters restaurants, things where it just like, maybe I don't personally agree with it. Like if I'm not going to take my family there, I'm not going to go buy stock in it type of thing. You know, things that are blatantly obvious where I don't like, or things that are helping abortion clinics, you know, things like, yeah, I'm not going to invest in that kind of stuff. But something like Amazon, who might do things with Black Lives Matter or things that I don't necessarily agree with, where I think they're giving some of their money and certain things. Like, problem is you get to the point where it's, my wife and I tried doing a lot of that, where we're boycotting a lot of companies we don't agree with.
Right.
It gets to the point where you're like, man, what do I buy anymore? Because everybody's doing something we disagree with.
But is that part of the point, though? Should you be that specific with
That's
managing your wealth and managing your money, that where you buy? Like, obviously, it's very hard because we buy everything from these companies that we don't know fully. But like in Jesus's day, if he was buying from different fruit stands or something,
Yeah.
would he be like, I'm not gonna buy from this person because I know they're a heathen, or
Right.
That's
not?
a good question. I don't know. I think if you know a company's knowingly doing wrong or sacrilegious or whatever you want to call it, I'd say that should be pretty obvious. Ones that are in the gray area, do I think it's a sin to buy from Amazon if I don't agree with every single thing Amazon does? As a whole, I think they're a good company. Are they doing certain things that I probably don't agree with? Yes.
Yeah, or like,
and everything else, sure.
or like,
Is that sinful to do?
or
that?
about like
I don't
Nike,
necessarily think so.
right? With like
Exactly.
child laborers in China and kind of taking
Like Nike,
advantage of offshore cheap labor, and you're like,
do they do a ton of good? Yes. Do they do it? Have they had transgender people and different stuff that I don't agree with? Yes. Am I going to never buy a Nike thing again? I don't think it's sinful to do that personally, but I don't know. The problem, part of it, because my wife and I said that we started boycotting a lot of this stuff after like COVID and stuff, when the things just got like where they're like, okay, you want to do this? No problem. You're not getting my business. Like, and I feel like I do it more than a lot of people. And she even said she was pretty big into it, and she got to the point where she's like, toothpaste or anything, it's like, I can't buy anything anymore because there's commercials of everything. You know, like anything you watch, like, oh, now there's a gay couple brushing their teeth. Can I not buy Colgate anymore? It's like, come on, like, it gets to the point where it's like, what do you gotta live in a box now to avoid all these companies? You know, I don't know.
I was just thinking about us being their friends. They just live together and they're brushing their teeth together.
I think you're right though. It's a very good question, because I think
They
do have a responsibility.
Like, how far does that? We say we're responsible for 10% to give it to a local church,
But I don't think.
But then after that, all responsibility is off.
No. I think the 90% is still 100%, because that's the thing too, is if you gave 10% to the church, but you were completely wasteful. If you spent 90% of pornography, you think that's a blessing to God? No, right? It's like, well, hey, I gave my 10% God. You can't get mad.
Right.
It's still his. It's still 100% of his money.
Like, I can give to the church for the, like, almost like the Roman Catholic idea. Like, I'll give to the church this amount of money, and that's sort of the, you know,
secures my spot in heaven.
Right, exactly. And so now I can go out and do all my stuff, you know, with my, you know, whatever. But I don't think, like you said, David, I don't think that there is a way to track all the money. And but
I mean, there is. It just is a high level of effort.
Just a full-time job.
It's a full-time job.
Right.
Okay.
And then even then, you wouldn't even know. You wouldn't even know, right? There's things that you don't know.
Well, everything that you make is made with chemicals, and all the chemical companies, like, you're never going to know who supplies raw material and who supplies the feedstock, and what DEI initiatives they're doing, and what You know, how are they taking advantage of offshore labor, and how
and
are
is
they
that
doing?
company only doing it because BlackRock is influencing them to do? You know, I mean, it goes back to
Did you say Black Barack?
BlackRock.
BlackRock.
He said Black Barack. I'm like,
Yes, I get it.
As opposed to white Barack.
He voted for him twice and he wants him back. Yeah.
He said Black Barack. I'm like, that's unnecessary.
Will was unhappy he only had 2 terms. He wanted to put it.
Oh yeah,
The
Yeah, do a lot of editing at this point.
there's really almost nothing left.
There's been nothing for the past.
No, it's a very. Okay, there's like gonna have Z. Goodness.
Okay, Kyle. So you get the rent checks, and then what? Then what do you do with them? Trying to make conversation here.
Is who am I? What?
give her
That's a really good flag.
Reading the ability to describe yourself. That's been the best.
that is like the best 3 minutes. Like, there's so much there.
It's so good.
He goes up. Are you Michael? No. Michael? He's the only guy in the coffee shop.
Michael?
Yeah, what is it? And then it's like 3 pumps of soy, 3 pumps of sugar, or whatever. Yeah, I forgot.
Peppermint. Oh, gross.
Yeah, it was real. Yeah. Ultimately, I don't think that we have to. I don't think that God is asking us to track our dollars down to the cents for who we're giving him money to. Because there's
So is it better to buy from your local farmer's market
Or get fruit from the Taliban.
in a way, you know what I mean? Like
I think if something like is so egregious, like the Taliban, right?
Correct.
Like, I'm not going to give my money to something that is that obviously, but I'm also not going to invest half my life into making sure that they're not.
Exactly.
And I don't know if that's sinful or the
No,
right
no.
answer, but that's just my stance on it.
That's exactly where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Because I think it gets to the point where it almost, and I'm not saying you're doing this because you're not, but like the Pharisees who are so worried about, don't, he healed somebody on a Sunday type thing. Like
Right.
they're missing the entire point by trying to be so legalistic and so holy that it's like, oh, I can't invest a single penny in this. It's like, I think Jesus would be like, you're missing the point here. Like,
I kind of
if you know this company's bad, great. But like, David, yeah, they did something you don't agree. Okay, that's not a sin. Just go buy the toothpaste, right? Like, I think
right.
maybe I'm completely, this show kind of made me think that way, but The Chosen literally made me think that that's kind of a lot of like how I see how Jesus would actually be. He'd be somebody who would joke around with the disciples and be fun and be like,
yeah,
it's
that's
like,
an awesome
just
show.
love, just like, I really like
You
that show
mentioned
because
that.
it really made me think that that's how Jesus, like how I actually, I'm
He's
like,
so
it makes
personable
sense. Yeah.
in that. Yeah.
Like you think it'd be like, okay, yeah, he is like that. Like stop overthinking everything. Just
Also tied to the Angel Network Studios so that they can make season 5.
Oh, okay. Are they completely crowdfunded?
They are. It's like a pay it forward.
That's cool.
It is, but it's also like, come on already. These actors are getting old.
yeah, right.
Like
season 5.
let's
man,
wrap
yeah.
up these 7 seasons so I can enjoy it already. I know.
is there
How's
gonna
that
be-
for
is there gonna be
selfish?
7?
Supposed to be 7 or 8 seasons, and they're like 4 in.
Yeah, and there hasn't been a
What if-
5th in a long time.
Well, the 4th just came out after like 2 years of hiatus.
When is it?
I think it's only out in theaters, or you got to pay for the premium subscription. I'm kind of waiting for it to be free and someone to pay it or to me.
I've watched however many are on Netflix or whatever.
That's so good. They come out with like season 6 and Jesus is like,
I wanted to, yeah, right. I wanted to buy it, but I had already given my 10% to the church,
right, exactly.
so I was off the hook.
Somebody else step up.
Fucking 90%.
But everybody gave to their local church and they couldn't fund it.